we have with us Chris Campbell from Baker Hughes and the Tales of the Tribunal. I will briefly give his bio, and then I'll put a link in his chat where you can check it. So Chris is a senior litigation counselor for Baker Hughes, based in Florence in Italy. And he advises on commercial dispute resolution matters in the oil and gas, energy, and technology sectors. You might also know him from the podcast Tales of the Tribunals, where he invites various guests and talks about interesting backgrounds of figures in international law and businesses. During his career, he attained an LLM from Tsinghua University, where he studied Chinese law and in international dispute resolution, and he was worked in commercial and legal matters across multiple continents. So he has a very vast experience from different jurisdictions. He is also a founder and coach of the Wismut team at the University of South Carolina, Joseph Rice School of Law, and the Charleston School of Law, where he's an adjunct professor and guest lecturer. And he's also very much active in the arbitration community, being involved in various initiatives such as the Association of Black Arbitration Professionals, the steering committee of the Silicon Valley Arbitration Mediation Center, and a founding member of Real Equality for Arbitration Lawyers, and a president of the Atlanta International Arbitration Society. So he is a very busy professional, as you can see, but he took some time to join us today. Hi, Chris. Thank you for tuning in. We are looking forward to hear your tips on how to build our business persona.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And I got to say, you're reading all that off, and I was like, oh, wait, who's this guy? Who are you talking about? Oh,
Yes, I'm making this up, actually. Don't believe me.
very well. No, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I guess
So,
the best way to start is to, tell us how we should strategize when we think about our business persona.
right. So I'm going to issue all of you a challenge, and it's going to be to think less like lawyers when we're having this conversation and more like business people. I think a lot of times there is this sort of implicit idea that lawyers should shy away from self-promotion or getting your name out there. But in fact, your first and most important client is you. You should think of yourself as a product, as a service provider. You are a service provider. Maybe that's not a hard stretch. But at the end of the day, not only are you a product, you're a brand, and you want people to buy into that brand. And so the way that you get the word out about you and how wonderful you and your team are is by telling people. If you don't tell them, if you don't show them, then they will never know. And you'll just be another thing that is left, another person that's left on the shelf. And so I think that's the first thing that I would say to set the foundation as we start this conversation today is to think of yourself as a brand. Now, at the same time, think about what are some of your favorite brands? What do they stand for? What does that mean? I will use a very sort of simple example. When people go to McDonald's, whether sorry, I may have repulsed a few of you with that, but you know what to expect. When you get, a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke, you have an idea of how that tastes, what that's like, or any of your favorite brands, whatever those things are, there are things that are associated with them and you trust will be part of your experience. How can you establish what that is for you as an arbitration professional, as a lawyer, as a trusted counselor, as a confidant? Those are all things to think about. And how you cultivate those things and get the message out is key to building not only your brand, but your brand strategy. So I think that's the first comment that I would say is we're going to challenge you today to think about yourself as a brand and a product and how you can get that message out to the marketplace. Sorry, you want a follow-up question? I can keep talking extemporaneously.
Yeah,
That
no
would time.
worries. Was a bit difficult to mute off. Okay, so
Yeah.
we need to start to think about ourselves as a product, right?
Yeah.
How was it in your case? What is the product you wanted to spotlight for the arbitration community?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think rather than thinking about it as narrowly as the arbitration community, what I really wanted to convey, um, more broadly for my career, even before thinking about me as a lawyer, is I wanted to come across as a competent, prepared, international business person, and legal professional. Those are the three main pillars: competent and prepared, international, and business and legal professional. Those are the three main pillars of my branding. And so, under those three main pillars, there are a bunch of sub points. So, when we say legal professional, okay, specifically litigation and arbitration, disputes, that becomes part of the brand. Commercial disputes, in particular, having that sort of mindset and understanding. When it comes to international, that's where some of the things that you've heard in my background, in my experience, um, hailing from the bustling metropolis of Irmo, South Carolina, I've managed to take that to working in Beijing and London and Florence, living in all over the world in many senses of the word. And so that sort of establishes a little bit of the internationality, speaking multiple languages, having a sort of international lifestyle. These are all sorts of snapshots that come together to make that second pillar of the brand. And then being competent and prepared. So that's a little bit harder to establish, but that's ultimately when you're trying to get someone to buy your product, to hire you as a lawyer, what you're thinking about. So how can we establish that short of having like a GoPro on our shoulder and like carrying it with us every day when we're going to work? What you can do instead is give people samples of your work. And how do you do that? A, publishing. Lawyers writing is their stock in trade. Helping with projects, putting together interesting and engaging projects. Speaking, like what I'm doing here right now, whether that's either as a featured speaker or a moderator or just helping put on an event or a panel. Those are three really easy things to do: writing and publishing, speaking and helping put on events, because people will see A, your ability at doing any of those things, and B, what your demeanor is. At the end of the day, people want to work with people that they like working with. Sure, there might be times when you work with someone that is just sort of unpleasant because they had some specific things that worked out for what you needed. But more often than not, all things equal, if you can work, both things are the same, but one is a bit more pleasant than the other, that person's going to get the job every time. And so, again, these are fundamental principles that we're talking about that I want you to apply to your own career and figure out how it can go to your practice of law. And of course, there are a few more things that we can talk about in those specific contexts. But for me, that's exactly what I did. I wrote book reviews, I wrote short form articles, I wrote long form articles, I moderated events. Anything that had to do with international law and arbitration that even thought about coming through South Carolina, people knew that that was Chris Campbell. I also went to where the work was and where the business was. I went and lived in China for several years. I picked up a decent amount of Mandarin so that I can still use it to this day. Then you have two principles. A, you become the person from that area that sort of has been really involved and is really active in that space. And also, you go to where the work is. So then you start to build up your reputation in two arenas. And then those things sort of build momentum on top of each other. And before you know it, that reputation is getting out there. And by doing that again, time over time, month after month, year after year, usually you will then have a reputation that is now built up. You'll have a portfolio that will be out there as well. And eventually, as I tell my students and young practitioners, you will have an opportunity that will present itself. You seize that opportunity and you crush it. You do as well as you can. And again, that's another notch on your belt to put forward in moving towards building your reputation and your brand.
I want to follow up on that. And you said people like to work with those who they think they have things in common and they relate well and they establish a connection. And in order to establish a connection with someone, you need to see a bit of authenticity, right? In order to build that. And how would you convey that authenticity within your brand so people can relate more to the things you're portraying?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a fine line. I think the first point is, of course, knowing your market and knowing your potential customers and audience. It's listening to them. It's having your ears open, and before you start trying to sell your message, go out there and listen and hear what people are saying. Hear how they talk about these things. Hear how the most successful people are the people that are really doing it well, are carrying themselves and conveying themselves. Now, you might expect that the next thing I would tell you is to then go out and try and be like those people and try and message like them. Well, no, actually not like I wouldn't recommend that. I think there might be elements, when you talk about providing value, having that sort of attention to detail and competence that would be the same. But instead of copying anyone else, what you would want to do is then say, okay, what is my voice? How do I want to talk about these things? Is there something that I see about this conversation that I can add to it from my own experience, as from whatever my background is, both professionally, where I'm from, things that I like about this topic, things I don't like about this topic. All of those things and your demeanor about how you talk about those things all goes into building your brand and ultimately your voice. And finding that voice is one of the hardest things to do. And I think it's something that you figure out from just doing this over and over again. I don't want you to take away from this that I'm telling you to go be an influencer necessarily on LinkedIn or just all of a sudden start, maybe don't even make a podcast. I mean, there's enough podcasts. Don't do another podcast.
You're not
But
looking for competitors, right?
exactly, you found me out. But no, the point would be, you know, I can't be anybody else but myself. And it's the same is true for you. What you can do is be the best version of you and try and put that out in such a way that that's something that people would want to be interested in. And I will tell you, most likely, more oftentimes than not, when you start doing that, it might be you and like three people and a dog. But that's okay. I mean, because that will be your initial audience. Those will be people that kind of know about you. And having a good rapport with those people and continuing to be consistent and present in the conversation will already make you leagues above people that are kind of just watching from the sidelines. What you'll also find is that in doing that, eventually there are people that are part of that audience that will maybe think of you when they have an opportunity that comes up, either to appoint as counsel or as arbitrator or any of those types of things. And most importantly, again, because most lawyers do not do any kind of self promotion more than maybe what their firm or their organization might do, you really stand out because you're doing something. And doing something is actually usually more effective than doing nothing.
100%. Um, but in order to arrive there, how
Mm.
can we help ourselves to create your brand in a sense of, okay, I'm going to sit with myself, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, what I'm good at, what market I'm targeting. So where should I start? Because I feel like if you look on LinkedIn, you see so many opportunities, so many things, and you just don't know which one will be relevant for you or which one will add, it will actually bring a benefit to your career. You can't just say yes to everything that lands on your plate. So how to strategize that a bit better?
Yeah, so I think to that point, you have to really understand the difference between your long-term and your short-term goals. So on the one hand, if someone were to say, I would like to be a regularly citizen arbitrator, okay, that's kind of a long-term goal for most people. In fact, that's probably something that might take you 5, 10 years, depending on where you are in your career. But you can say, okay, because you have defined what that goal is, you can say, okay, now to sit as arbitrator, what do I need to do? People need to know who I am. I need to know about at least a couple of areas of law where I could be appointed as an arbitrator. I need to have the skill set for writing an award and have the competency things that we've talked about. So those are things that are planks that would lead you to that long-term goal. And so in understanding what your eventual long-term goal is, you can say, okay, well, now I can make some short-term goals. And in making those short-term goals, you can say, okay, well, maybe I should get a credential. Maybe I want to go to the Chartered Institute. Maybe I want to go to the IMI. Maybe I want to do some other formalized training. Maybe I want to publish 2 articles a year. Maybe I want to go to a certain number of conferences so that I get to meet a certain number of people. Maybe you're going to set a specific metric for how many people you want to meet. I mean, I think it's interesting because often what happens when we talk about soft skills is because they are soft skills. People tend to not want to be more methodical about them because it feels like weird. Like if you were saying, "Well, I shook 100 hands today," that's that comes across as a little bit strange. But it's not even so much about that as it is saying, "Okay, well, how can you measure how many people you actually met and how effective your tactics or your strategy is being if you're not measuring it against something?" So I think you have to sort of walk that fine line of saying, "Okay, I do want to measure how many people I'm meeting and like the things that I'm doing to grow my brand and develop my soft skills without becoming a robot and treating human interactions as this sort of transactional thing." But I think they are skills and skills have to be practiced and sharpened. And ultimately, to put it now a fine point to answer your question, what I've just said in this last couple of minutes has been, I think, defining your long-term goal or goals. And then from understanding what your long-term goal is, you can say, okay, I now have some short-term goals. And the combination of those two sets of goals will then help you define one, if not more, planks in your brand that you're trying to build up and trying to sell to the market.
And given that you have long-term goals, short-term goals, plus multiple platforms to manage, how do you make those things to be consistent? Because I think one of the key values of a brand is to be consistent.
Mm.
Otherwise, people will not understand exactly who you are, who are you targeting. So how do you manage that? Do you kind of prepare an outline? Oh, I want to convey A, B, and C this year, so I'll make sure I will integrate this in my speeches. Or how do you do it?
That's a great point. Look, and I'm going to actually ask you a couple of questions to answer that. And we're going to stay with McDonald's. I don't know. It's not like
You
I've
just
had them
like it.
recently. Yeah, I was going to say, I guess my American roots are coming out. But do you remember maybe about a decade ago, McDonald's like really expanded its menu? They had like a ton of menu items. Do you remember something like that?
It's not my favorite place to go, so I'm maybe not the target audience, but
No, no, no. It's you don't even have to have gone there. They had these huge signs, and it was like overwhelming. It was huge numbers of items, and so it became a lot of people's not favorite place to go because they no longer were serving their main audience who wanted burger, fries, chicken nuggets, fish. That's it. That's all they wanted. And now they were having like cafe stuff and all sorts of different weird items that no one really wanted. And so not only did that alienate their core customer base, the people that like also didn't love McDonald's and they weren't going to go there anyway were confused. There were no new customers coming in. So they actually went through a number of years where they lost huge numbers of sales. Why? Because they were inconsistent with their branding. People didn't know what to expect and they were trying to do too much at once. So, what you've seen over the last, well, if one were to go to McDonald's, you would see that their menus shrunk by a huge extent. They got back to basics. They said, okay, at our areas of most profitability, we had a simple value proposition and a simplified menu. And that has allowed them to really focus on the things that they do well, to deliver more consistent value and a consistent message. So, not to call any of you a Big Mac, none of you are Big Macs. What I would say is that you are a product. And so, to your point, Mihaela, is that if you're trying to talk about everything, and I am guilty of this as well because I have a ton of interest, but you cannot in the same speech or at the same time try to become a preeminent sports arbitrator or a space law arbitrator or AI or oil and gas or energy because people would start to look at you and say, what exactly are you? Not even a master of a jack of all trades, master of none. They would instead say that you were just you're that you're too many things to too many people and therefore unreliable. So better, even if you have multiple things that you would eventually like to be known for, focusing on one or two of those things at once, going really in depth and owning that conversation and establishing to people, I really do know a lot about this thing. Let me demonstrate my mastery or my knowledge of those things, even if it is to a lesser level than someone that's been practicing 30 years, is going to be a more effective usage of your time than it is to say, I'm going to try and talk about everything under the sun or follow trends. That's another thing that I see a lot of folks do too, is that, okay, this is the hot legal trend of the day, so I'm going to write a paper about it, or I'm going to try and talk and act as if I'm an expert about it. Well, the problem with that is, how could you possibly be? How could you possibly be if it's only something that's just come up more recently? And it was kind of like as AI was first coming out, you had all these people saying, "Oh, I'm an AI lawyer. I know everything about AI." And it was clear that they had either taken their paper or their comments directly from ChatGPT or one of the other tools. And sure, that's an approach, but when it comes to the substance of being able to actually hold up that competence piece that we were talking about before, that will be lacking for sure.
Okay, so we already know what piece of the menu we want to be from McDonald's. Who's going to be the cheeseburger? Who's going to be the chicken nuggets? But the question is that not everyone wants to go at McDonald's, right? So how we overcome those challenges? How are we going to deal with our brand whenever things don't go the way we want? Any advice on that? I'm sure you been to the same issue like all of us, questioning and double questioning things. But give us a bit some advice how to overcome the challenges.
Yeah. And look, I promise I'm actually done talking about McDonald's. We won't bring up McDonald's
No
again.
worries. We can talk about Shake Shack. We can change it a bit.
Yeah, that's true. Shake Shack is pretty good. You know, I think it's up to you to decide, how you want to go about acquiring capital in sort of these social environments. For me personally, in my brand, I'm perfectly okay and comfortable with the fact that my personality is not for everybody. And I think that is something that if you can get comfortable with that idea, then you can really focus on the people that actually do like you and that do want to do work with you and that your message does resonate with. Because I think it goes to that same point in that same principle we were discussing a moment ago is that, okay, so your personality rubs some people the wrong way or some people don't love that personality. What are you to then do? What, to try and change yourself, to try and change who you fundamentally are and be something that you're not? Um, I think that's dangerous. I think that that comes to not only a possibility of confusing people that are looking at you and considering you, but it also has the potential to confuse yourself, to not know, who are you, what are you really about, and to sort of compromise your values. So I think it's really important to say, that's okay. Hey, look, Burger King people are not McDonald's people. Ah, see, one more. To say that neither of them are maybe Shake Shack people. Maybe none of those people go to Chick-fil-A. That's okay. Each one of those brands has a very clear customer profile. Actually, let's use an international version. Maybe the people that shop at Lidl are not the same people that would shop at okay, I'm going to say ABC International Grocery Chain. That's not Lidl or Aldi, right? Maybe those are not the same customers, and so because they have different profiles, what you could then say is, okay, that's fine. We're going to consolidate around the people that we work with. And if there is something, maybe there is something about your personality that is abrasive. Maybe are either prone to anger, or maybe you're a bit long-winded. Maybe anything like that. Those are things that you can actually work on. That's a skill issue more so than a brand issue. And if we want to be again technical about it, there's this great YouTube channel called Charisma on Demand, and it's this guy. He literally will take you through different social scenarios, including a lot of them are taken from news headlines and celebrity interactions, and he'll break down from a body language perspective to a way that something is said to little turns of phrase that, well, can give you charisma on demand. That's a free one for you. I really enjoy that channel because I think it's really interesting to learn about human sociology and psychology in that way.
So we need to change a bit our body language to be more likable.
Well, I think it's relevant. Yeah, I mean, if you realize, like, if I was talking to you and I was like, yeah, so you got to learn, you'd be like, I mean, Chris was saying some good stuff, but he was a little aggressive. I don't like all that.
Thank you very much, Chris. I know I promised the audience that we're going to give them 20 minutes for their questions, and I want to keep that promise. So feel free to turn on your camera and interact with us. And if not, I can read the questions from the chat. So up to you, whatever feels the most comfortable.
As long as no one else is taking the first, I will be the brave one. One point, Chris, you already to some extent touched upon, and going with your examples of Burger King, Shake Shack, or McDonald's, how do I find out, like concretely, what I want to be? Like, in other words, we always hear about the word niche, finding your concrete niche. Probably you can tell us how you personally found your niche, and have you came across any concrete methods, or do you have any ideas on how to find it?
Yeah. So I'll answer the question about me specifically first and then sort of then branch out. So for me specifically, I'm a little bit of a weird case in that if you were to go back and look at my senior quote from high school where they said, well, Chris, what is it that you're going to go do? I said, well, I'm going to go to college in South Carolina. I'm probably going to go study international business and law and then go work as an international lawyer. And then it's like, okay, indeed he did. But I recognized fully that that's not how it happens for most people. And I will say the nuance in that is, though I knew that that was kind of my broad long-term goal, I didn't know exactly what in international law that I'd be doing, and I certainly didn't know how exactly I would get there. And those things came from trial and error, just exposing myself to different things, saying, okay, huh, I do not love tax law. Probably not going to do that. Or, I like disputes. Okay, I'm pretty okay with that. I can talk good sometimes. Maybe that's what I'll do instead. And I think it's through that, expressing yourself and exposing yourself to these types of opportunities to learn, is where you're going to see what you might want to build your brand around. And I think it's perfectly okay if you sit here today having this conversation or listening to this conversation and not knowing what that looks like. Now, let's say, okay, Chris, I'm with you. I want to develop my brand, but I don't know how to do that. And I don't know where to go. I mean, cool. How do I do that? Okay, so listen close. Here's how we're going to do that. And in fact, I'm going to even say, do not do this in a digital medium. Do not do it with your computer or your phone. I'm going to tell you, do it old school. Go get a big piece of paper. Big is relative. Go get a piece of paper, blank piece of paper. And there, you're going to write words that you think describe what it is that you want to do. You're going to draw, when you write each word, you're going to draw a circle around it. And I think at this point, when you're starting, you want to write maybe ideas down. And you're going to draw little branches from each one of those circles that are going to describe other things that you associate with that. Once you've done that exercise, and it's okay to use maybe even front and back of the paper, once you've done that, you're then going to numerize, rank the top, let's say top five things that are most important to you of all the things that you've written out. And those top five things, maybe that's your brand. Maybe those are going to be the building blocks that you start with and say, okay, all this other stuff is important. Maybe it fits under these 5 points and principles, but those top five most important things, that's what we're going to sell ourselves on, at least to start here. I mean, it's going to be a combination of things that you want to do, things that you think that you're good at, and then in drawing a web and combining those things together, that's how you sort of develop your identity. And the act, and this is why I'm insisting that you do this with a pen or pencil and paper instead of just doing it online, is that tactile experience of actually thinking through it and actually writing it out draws a connection between your physical body and your brain, and thinking about what is it that I'm really about and that I want to accomplish here in this professional endeavor of mine. And once you've done that, you've come closer to having a brand. And now that you've got an idea about what you kind of stand for and what you want to do, well, then we can talk about goals in the way that we talked about them before, about those long-term goals, those short-term goals. And one thing that I should have mentioned earlier, but is also important, is you want to put a time frame with your goals. You don't want to just generally say, oh, I'd like to run a marathon. Okay, well, if you keep saying every year I'd like to run a marathon, but you never say, what am I going to do to help me get there over what period of time, you will never run that marathon. And so, first of all, I want my kudos for not using another McDonald's analogy. But two, you need to draw that fine point of a time frame on there in order to really help you get to the finish line.
Definitely agreed. One follow-up question: when I imagined yourself, and very interesting to hear that you had your plan of being an international lawyer even back at college age. Is there anything you would like to recommend to yourself, Chris, with 19, 20 years old, or whenever you started law school, to do different on building your brand as an international lawyer?
Yeah, buy more Bitcoin. That might have been a good idea at the time. But I had a business school professor who was a big proponent of. He said the school would provide a free copy of the Wall Street Journal to every student every day, and he would tell us that we should read it cover to cover every single day. Now, none of us did that. None of us did that. You maybe do it once or twice a week and just try to sort of get an idea of it. But the principle was there, right? It's to just read. And again, it's exposure. So reading is one way to go about that. And, reading things like if it's arbitration, the Clue Arbitration blog, reading articles as they come out, attending conferences. But I think it's exactly that latter point that I've just made. It's that it doesn't have to be one specific thing. The point is, to get out there and to see, okay, you think that you know what your brand is and that you want to develop it around. Well, before you start really doing too much into changing your whole philosophy, get out there and actually go expose yourself to it. Go see, is this something I really find interesting? Do I like the people in this field? Could I see myself working in this field? Um, if any of those things end up not being exactly what you want, that's not bad news. That's great because now you know that's something you don't want to do, and you can develop and devote that time into doing something else. I think that's the single greatest thing that you can do is just go learn as much as you can, either about the field, about the world. Get out there, meet people, and you won't regret having taken a lot of time to go do that.
Thanks for sharing this, Chris.
Yeah.
Well, I have a follow-up, but we also have a question in the chat from Uroj. Do you want to ask the question yourself, or shall I read it? Okay, I guess I'll read the question. So Uroj is asking, okay, I got a permission, is asking, he's now currently a civil lawyer and he wants to become an arbitrator. Any advice on how to achieve that? I guess it would be helpful to know a bit the background and where he's at the moment, but maybe we can speak in more general terms.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the general terms are things that we talked about a little bit earlier. That is, before you say, okay, I'm going to go be an international arbitrator, are you getting appointments? Are you getting approached about arbitration domestically? Right? I mean, are you known in that field for that? Because really, it's a lot easier to break into that international scene if you can already establish that from a domestic standpoint, you are a scholar or someone that is taken with high regard in that. So that's a good question. And how does one establish a profile as an arbitrator? Credentials can help. What are your publications? What have you spoken about? What have you been involved with? Because, and this is something that goes a little bit more to my day job. As an in-house counsel, I'm appointing arbitrators on a pretty regular basis. And how do we do that? Well, especially if it's a large, complex matter that could tangibly affect the company, there's no way that we're not appointing an arbitrator that we can't get good intel on, that we can't get an understanding or an idea that, not so much are they going to vote for us, but an understanding of how they feel about certain issues. To what extent can we understand their philosophy, their approach to managing a case, their experience with certain industries and fields. So, and a lot of arbitrators are really sort of like almost obsessive about keeping things close to the chest and not letting things be known about their background. But I think it should be the opposite. I mean, again, you're not going to get every appointment from everybody anyway. So at least be clear and transparent about what it is that you do believe, because that can only serve your interest. There are people out there that likely do think like you, and those are the folks that you want to appoint you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Actually, I am a civil lawyer in Pakistan, and I am working since 2000. And at the same time, I am teaching in different universities and colleges as well, and I am teaching civil law basically. But at the same time, I mediate in certain my regular cases, and you know that whenever you are serving in any organization, you do have skills to do certain administrative works over there and settle the issues among people and uh, be able to understand their conflicts and resolve the matters among them. So that is why I have started thinking that I do have this potential to serve on a big in a big picture and to change my current position to somehow in an international arbitrator. Would it be okay for me to go for this position, or should I stay wherever I am?
So
What do you think?
first of all, and I know this will sound very self-help, but I think in order for you to achieve that goal, you have to first believe that you can, right? I mean, I think if you're not, as with any advocate, if you're not convinced of your argument that you're going to make to the court or to the arbitrator, then there's no hope of convincing whoever that is. Point number one. Point number
Mm-hmm.
two would be, I wonder, are there any industries or fields that you're really interested in? Maybe like energy or maybe retail, commodities, anything like that?
Most probably commodities or retail, not in
Well,
energy. But I do believe that as far as my concept is that being a lawyer, we are basically researchers. So whenever I will get new horizon, I'll be able to research on it.
Yeah. So I think one, commodities is a really interesting area to be in right now, given the economic turmoil in a lot of parts of the world. So now is a really great time to sort of try to distinguish yourself as someone that knows a lot about that. And especially in sitting in Pakistan, being able to write from a Pakistani perspective, but also a global perspective on how commodities markets and just in particular commodities disputes are currently being handled and maybe handled in the future, I think is valuable. And I don't think you necessarily need to publish in like a law review in order to get that out there. You might be able to start by just putting some things on LinkedIn. You might be able to get involved with, there are definitely commodities disputes organizations or other arbitral, specifically arbitration institutions, whether that be the IBA, whether that be the ICC publications, the localized Asian arbitration institutions in the ACI, Asian International Arbitration Center, the HKIAC, et cetera, those types of industry localized arbitral institutions. Write for them, send things to them. They all have publications or events, and you can reach out to them and say, hey, look, I know this really specific thing about Pakistani commodities disputes or things in the region, and that is content that is valuable. And people, believe it or not, do read those things. And that goes to building your brand up in that field specifically and eventually putting you in a position where you can try and get on arbitrator lists and eventually get appointments from there.
So is there any specific certification I need to go through?
No, I don't think there's anything specifically. I mean, from certifications, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators has a pretty well-known global brand, but I mean, that's just
Hmm.
one, probably a few. But I would look to see maybe for the businesses that are operating in Pakistan, what are they using to resolve their disputes and trying to see if you can get on the arbitrator panel there. And then the next step from there would be the big global brands that we were talking about, ICC, HKIC, SEAC, et cetera.
I
Okay,
want to
okay, thank you.
ask you some follow-up questions, Chris,
Yeah.
before we concluding. Um, a lot of people, when they talk about personal brand or branding, the talk is quite abstract and the things are quite general. And I want to know, in your case, how much time do you allocate weekly or monthly for it, and what practical things do you do? For example, one of the advice that I received for someone was that they will block every week one specific hour in an agenda only to think and reassess their career. So they'll have a weekly notification on their phone every Friday, I know, at 10 or something, at 10 a.m. And they will take that time just to assess where I'm at, where I'm going, and so on. Other tips that I receive is from one of my mentors that she will have at least one business launch every week, which at the moment I thought was too much, but now I realize, okay, it could be attainable. But how is it in your case, practical things that you do for building your brand, and how much time do you allocate for it?
Yeah, so that's interesting. An hour a week to reassess. I think that hour could maybe be because I think on some level you have to when you set a course or make a strategy, you have to see how that strategy is going to play out, right? So I think you don't necessarily need to reassess it every week, but maybe once a month, maybe every quarter. Quarter might be more reasonable depending on the length of the goals. But every week I think the weekly time that you're setting aside is is a function of whatever your goal is. So if you're wanting to get your name out there or you're wanting to meet more people in the field, you can say, okay, I'm going to set aside honestly an hour is kind of on the low end, I would think, because I think if you're trying to say you want to set out a lunch, that could be the hour already, right? And would you have done anything else on top of really trying to reach out or build your brand? Um, Let me maybe answer the question by saying this. There's this well-known principle in personal finance about if you're trying to manage debt or you're trying to manage your budget, you have to pay yourself first. And I think we often think about that in money, but I think even in your allocation of time. So yes, of course, you should dedicate, the due time to your employer and to your work and to your projects and to your other responsibilities. But I think it's also important that you have to have that amount of self-care and self-investment first. I would do it early in the week. I would say, okay, while I'm sharp, while I'm attentive, I'm going to make a post on LinkedIn. I'm going to reach out to two or three people. I'm going to work on my article. Um, that type of attention to yourself will pay dividends because you're not putting it off to the last minute. You're not putting it off to a point when you're kind of tired. and your quality of investment will be higher. And it doesn't need to be an hour every day or anything like that, but it does need to be intentional. And I think it should be earlier in your week and on your days than at the end of the day when you'll tend to be a little bit more tired and therefore less attentive to whatever you're doing.
And how is it for you? Oh, we still
How is
have
it for me?
who wants to ask a question, but tell us first your recipe.
So usually, I usually have 2, sometimes 3 days a week where I will work on these types of things. Usually on a Sunday, usually on like a Wednesday or a Thursday, and then sometimes Friday afternoon when things are done for the week. I usually will have Saturdays. I try and really disengage hard from being on the internet and or doing work project things or side project things. But yeah, I mean, and that is a combination of working on my networking stuff, which I'll do on LinkedIn and building relationships in that way, having digital coffees with people. That will be working on my articles and my writings and things that I'm working on. And finally, it'll be working on the podcast, Tales of the Tribunal, where we interview people from around the world of international law, business, and dispute resolution. So that all sort of
Nice
combines.
plug-in.
Yeah, right. I
Yes.
had to make it happen in there. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what my weekly working on my brand tends to look like.
Thank you. I put the link in the chat, the Tales of the Tribunal, so I'm sure people will look for it and listen more to your podcast. We have questions from Eileen. Would you like to address the question or would you like to? Oh, perfect.
Let me see if I can see it, or if she's going to come on and ask it. That can work
Yes.
too.
Yes, thank you for your session and for sharing your insights. I also wondered if you could share what are specific type of experiences that helped you enhance your confidence in developing your soft skills, how to communicate properly and how to build a strong brand and I guess not persistence, but a sense of trust with the people who you communicate with.
Yeah, failure, Aline, a lot of failure. And you know, and it's no secret that a lot of the times, you know, what the public sees and what they know is usually when it's a success, what you're known for now, and hopefully the thing that you're known for is not a negative thing. But yeah, I mean, I had my own businesses that some have been successes, some have been failures. Some of it is trying out for different positions and it not working out. Most notably, anyone that knows me well, and I won't tell you the full story here, but one of the things that I did in college was I was a stand-up comedian. I did stand-up comedy for several years, which, yes, the people are probably listening, oh my gosh, what? And so, especially when I started doing that, my first set was a complete disaster. It was terrible. Didn't get any laughs. You know, is the when people are laughing at you more so than laughing with you, and that felt really bad. I didn't like that. But the reason why I wanted to do stand up was one, because I thought I was reasonably funny and I thought I could make people laugh. But more importantly, because I wanted the ability to, as you will often have to do as a counsel or as an arbitrator, be able to look into a crowd, be able to make any sort of argument, and not worry about the fact that people are staring daggers into you or not really on your side, and you being able to effectively communicate at the same time. Um, and so it was failing at that first, and then getting pretty okay. I mean, Look, I'm not saying I'm Dave Chappelle. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying. I'm saying that I did it enough that I did get some pretty decent laughs and did some well in some competitions. Um, and so I think that again is the principle is saying that whatever your skill set would be that you would want to have that you would be known for is that you just go out and try, right? And I understand that I'm saying that in a very extrovert coded way, right? I think it takes an immense amount of courage to try any of those things, even if you're not talking about something as direct as doing stand-up comedy. And so if you want to try and dip your toe into something, maybe you say, okay, well, I'm going to post on Young OG Mid, which is a really popular listserv for people working in the field. I'm going to post on that once a month or once a week. That is a good way to start getting your foot out there. And okay, well, you can see, okay, well, look, no one bit my head off. No one yelled at me for making those posts. In fact, some people agreed with me. People saw I had something to say. Okay, well, an arbitration book came out. Well, I'm going to read that and I'm going to post my own little book review on it, or I'm going to reach out to the publisher and see if they want a book review. Okay, well now, well shoot, well now you've posted a few times on one of the world's best listservs for young professionals that's monitored by senior people. You've written a little book review. Okay, well now I'm going to get a little crazy. All right, I'm going to volunteer to help with a conference. Okay, well now you've written a book review. You've worked with a conference. You posted on the Young Ojiman. Well, that's three major things that have a lot of visibility that are not so overwhelming, and that you don't have to overcommit yourself to doing those things. And so whether it's those three specific things or not, I think the idea is saying whatever my goal, my plan is to execute on reaching these goals, part of that is going to be stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit and being okay with that. Hey, chances are you probably gonna mess up. Okay. But you messing up is not the end of the world, because everyone has messed up. And as long as you go into it with an air of humility and being willing to learn and grow, it is absolutely fine. It is absolutely fine. And I think it's that courage to do that which is going to help you take the next step into building your brand and building your career as an arbitration and legal professional.
I can only
Thank you very
second the recommendation of engaging in on-demand and posting there. I think I was a rapporteur a couple of years ago, and people even back to today, they're stopping me and say, "Oh, you're the one posting on on-demand." And
Yeah.
I've seen so many emails from you, so it's definitely working out. I posted now the link in the chat for those who want to check it out. We promised 45 minutes. We went 5 a bit extra, but I'm very grateful for Chris' time and for your time, for everyone who joined today. I hope you get a few tips and few takeaways that will help you strategize your career. We're going to have a next episode in July, and we're going to talk about pitching and how to bring clients to the law firm. So stay tuned. We're going to announce it on our page, and I wish you everyone a wonderful day and hope you to see you around. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.